Hello everybody. Thank you for coming to today's program. My name is Emily Morey and I'm a historical researcher in the local history and genealogy division here at the Central Library of Rochester and Monroe County. Today's presentation is Historical Druggists of Rochester and Western New York, 1870 to 1920. As our presenter mentioned just now, it's a bit of a niche topic, but one that I think is pretty cool. So our presenter today is Dick Campbell. He is both an avid collector of dose glasses, which you will hear all about, as well as an amateur genealogist. So he is combining these two topics to offer you this wonderful presentation today about some of the interesting folks who were druggists in our area in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. So I will have Mr. Campbell give his talk, and then after we can do some questions and answers, question and answer period if folks have questions. And I will just say to the folks live streaming at home, we're aware that we are experiencing some audio issues. There is a hum that we're working to address, but unfortunately it might not be fixed today. So thank you for your patience, and without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce Dick Campbell.
Yeah, my granddaughter clapped, otherwise nobody was so sure. Could you guys move, do you want to move up a little more? Because it's not huge text. You're okay. 3 rows is okay. All right, stay where you are. This is my granddaughter, Bria, and my wife, Ruth Ann. And this whole thing is her fault, my wife's fault, because her great-grandfather had a drugstore at 105 East Main Street, Rochester. And once we started researching the genealogy piece, and I discovered a little dose cup for him, I do the history on them all, and then it got out of control, sort of. So I have 210 of these little cups at home. Anyhow, we're going to touch on some of the interesting people. With this small a number, if you want to interrupt me and ask a question, you can. Long history in Rochester of druggists in a very undisciplined art. There were no real colleges for this stuff for a long, long time. In 1881, Albany College is one of the 14 pharmacy colleges in the United States. And it wasn't until 1905 that the state required it to be licensed. By process of observation, this is a map of East Main Street, and her great-grandfather's store was over here. What I had found interesting throughout this whole process is the shape of the stores were really skinny, very skinny and very deep. Doesn't matter if it's a side road or a main road. And the best we can tell is that a lot of people would live up in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th floor, downtown buildings, and they would come down and not walk very far. It wasn't like going to Walgreens now where you hop in your car and you can drive miles and you don't care. So that kind of gives you a layout of the geographies of the whole thing. Okay. This kind of gives you a little view of the relative density and population of the druggists in the city. In 1870, 10 of the 21 druggists were on Main Street and Buffalo Street. It's all the same road. And they were within 2 blocks of each other, and that's that walking thing again, right? They're all over the place. The number of people per store kind of was consistent. Then in 1930, you can see where Liggett's and Walgreens first showed up in this area. Okay. So, first one is the Haas and then Althans and Zimmerman drugstore. G. Hermann Haas, German immigrant, and I'm going to touch on what makes each one a little bit interesting, not just their druggist story or not their drugstore information. But you can see this is what a dose cup looks like. They're about 2 inches tall with embossed raised lettering on them. He was big on homeopathic medicine, and Boric and Tafel was one of the big companies in that. When you research, it's challenging because street numbers change, as do street names and other things. So he started 43 Front Street, which is pretty much no longer there, Then he went to East Main, and it was called 38 East Main Street. But later on, it was called 105 East Main Street. So when you're researching, you have to be aware of all the goings on. You can't read it in this light, but in the upper left corner is a small box. It's about 2 by 3.5 inches, and it had a bottle in it of a medicine. And the medicine was to be taken, I know you can't read it. Up here on the box it says, contents to be taken with a half pint of proof alcohol. So whether we cured you or not didn't really make a lot of difference because you were happy. Anyway, it didn't really care. So he was also an inventor, but one of his most significant contributions was as a member and vice president and French horn player in the first Rochester Philharmonic. This is before the current one that we have now, and it was called the Philharmonic Society. I love this picture, and I don't really remember where I got it. This was the second public concert of the Philharmonic Society in 1868, which makes it a fair amount older than the RPO. But it lists a pretty high quality program. It lists all the instrumentalists. Here's G. Herman Haas over here in the horn section and noted as vice president. When he retired, Charles Althans took over the store. Althans, you can see his bottle down here. It's a little bit not as clear. Go ahead. You can go ahead. Sorry. He was a surgeon in the Civil War, and you'll see some common themes throughout this whole thing. Surgeons, candies, candy makers, cigar sellers, things like that pop up throughout here quite a bit with most of these people. And he was in Brooklyn, but he came up to Rochester and took over the business in 1891 and had it till about 1895. After that is where George Zimmerman comes in, family member. His dose cup, his bottle, and this is his street, or his store, sorry, this is Main and South Water Street, which is, I think, where the convention center is now. Everything's been gone. So here's the historical bank over here with the big columns on the front that are in the convention center. And it's interesting because it was very important when you passed down a business, and if you had a high reputation like Haas did, you didn't want to lose the reputation. So when you go from Haas's bottle at the top, the second one, Charles Althans, says successor to G.H. Haas, and the third one down, which is George Zimmerman, says proprietor of. So he kept his name throughout so that people would trust the business. Next guy we come to is Elvin Dewey. Complete luck that I got this dose cup and then researched it. I was talking to her piano teacher's husband, and he goes, I think I might have one. I got a bunch of little jars in the basement. I went to the basement and I looked through, and there it was sitting in a cardboard box. Elvin Dewey was also a doctor, and he had two stores, Monroe Avenue and Pinnacle Avenue. You can go ahead. His kind of unusual claim to fame, he was a collector of Indian artifacts, huge quantities of Indian artifacts. So he was president of New York State Archaeology Society, winner of the Corn Planter Medal for Meritorious Research. And what's a little odd is that these things, pretty much you could go out, and if you thought it was Indian grounds, you could just dig and find stuff, even burial grounds. So it says up here, you know, he writes that he recently opened 3 Indian graves, but didn't find anything new to add to his collection. But in the meantime, or after that, there are laws that you can't just go dig. Don't stick a shovel in the ground. And as he went on, he became a bigger advocate for preservation than he did the archaeology side of it. He also owned the 4th largest stone axe that was known. It weighed 24 pounds, 16 inches. The blade was 9 inches wide, 2 inches thick, and 17 inches in circumference. It'd be like an axe, that big. So it was a damage causer. Here's a little picture of some of the things he had, combs and carvings and things like that. And here's where we see this kind of change in tone from archaeologist digger to preservationist. He had a toast when he was chairing a meeting, and he said, you know, American first and the first Americans, giving the Indians a little more credit. When I move over, am I in your way? When I go that way? I'm not? Okay. So he kind of turned around and was much more respectful of the whole thing. His collection was huge, and at one point it was donated to, it was called the Municipal Museum, which is now the Rochester Museum and Science Center. He had 10 and 12,000 and later 20,000 items, but they didn't stay in Rochester. They went to Mount Holyoke College, which was his wife's alma mater, so they got a lot of it. And again, what's kind of interesting about some of these people, you're going to see these caricatures a couple more times. He was also involved in the Water Authority and things like that. So there's a book in the other building. It's called Society Men, I think, of Rochester, where all these caricatures are, which are just, they're tons of fun to look at. You'll see some more. So they characterize things that they did more than their profession. Right. A name everybody knows, R.J. Strassenberg. And why do we know it? We know it because of the planetarium, but we don't necessarily know it because of how it started. He started working for a different company on West Avenue. It was called Chamberlain Drugs, and that picture is on eBay for $169 if you want to buy it. And nobody does it. We just cut and paste. All right, go ahead. You can see a picture out. This is the store right here, and then I zoomed in here so you could be sure and read Strassenberg, and you see cigars and other things that everybody sold in the drug business. He seemed to have a golden touch, which we'll see, because they expanded and then they went into manufacturing more than just dispensing of drugs. And he was super busy in Rochester society. I mean, you can see the Rochester Club, Lake Placid Club, Masons, a lot of Masons at this time frame. Cyrene Commander, Knights Templar, Damascus, all over the place. Oak Hill Country Club. Go ahead. So, in a progression, these are their 4 business locations. I don't have a picture here, but this was one of the first ones. The second one, they moved into this larger facility over here, and they're starting to sell a lot of things other than medicines. Here's sick room supplies and things. Then over here is the third one. And then, if anybody remembers, they were on Jefferson Road in what was called the Miracle Mile back 70s. Maybe the Miracle Mile was just developed like crazy. And that was a huge operation down there. Here are a lot of the gadgets and some of the medicines they made, astringents, biphetamine. I don't know anything about drugs, just the people that sold them. Syringes, all kinds of things, different, adult dose for flatulence, pylorospasm, dysphoria, all kinds of weird things. And it was probably the same medicine, but fixed everything up for you. And their claim to fame, everybody knows, they donated $2.4 million. This is the second generation after R.J. Strassenberg. They donated that for the construction and lifetime maintenance of the planetarium. And that gift was worth over $20.5 million today. That number is a couple years old, so it's probably 23 million, 24 million. So it should be good for the lifetime maintenance of the planetarium. Next we have the Payne family. Payne may be a known name because this group, they were direct descendants of Thomas Maine, who came to Massachusetts from England in 1621, founders of the eastern branch of the Plymouth colony. One of the very, very oldest families to be over here. Almost all of them were doctors and very religious people. He too was a surgeon, Dr. Payne was, 121st Regiment Infantry in New York, but in the War of 1812. So, and this is back a ways. This is, certainly before the Civil War. If you ever have time and want to go to a cool cemetery, that monument is in the Albion Cemetery. It's one of the nicest, prettiest, well laid out, well kept cemeteries I've ever seen. And it's got a tower you can climb, which is open, but you shouldn't take a 4-year-old in there like I did. Go ahead. He partnered with a man named Nicholson when he started. This is a picture from Albion. There's the store right there with the awning on it, right here in a picture. That must be everybody that lived in Albion in 1860, because it's not a big town, you know, even now it's not that big. And the map shows them the third building down, and then he moved and they kind of juggled who went where and who taught with who. And eventually they moved to Rochester. Did it freeze? That's okay, the one I was doing yesterday froze too. Again, you're going to get some more semi-familiar names when we go through here. The first person that was actually a predecessor to the Paynes having the drugstore was William Pitkin. Everybody knows the name Pitkin of a certain age, right? If you're 20, you probably don't know. He was the 12th mayor of Rochester, and I mentioned they were politically connected. He married the daughter of Nathaniel Rochester, and the company later became Chase Pitkin, that we all bought stuff from at one time or another. Eventually, when he kind of decided to retire, it was handed off to Lansing B. Swan, who was a brigadier general in the Union Grays. Again, that's a Civil War piece. He invented this thing called Swan's atmospheric soda fountain. Don't know how it worked, but soda fountains are a huge thing throughout all these drugstores too. When he passed away, A.S. Lane took over, and Lane and Payne became partners in the business. Mr. Lane was a member of the first Rochester Fire Department, the Protective Sack and Bucket Company. So now that the actual Payne members are back in running it after Mr. Lane, you can see what he started out in terms of making money and was very cautious. He made $250 was his first year income. He saved 50 of it. Second year his salary was 300, he saved 100. And by then he felt he could, you know, he bought a share in the Swan drugstore, and it still bears their name. And it is recognized as the oldest continuous drugstore in Rochester, founded 1820, still going. After C.F. Payne, then C.D. Van Zandt was a successor. He was big on collecting weapons, daggers, spears, all kinds of stuff, which he also donated to the Municipal Museum, now the RMSC. And again, he was a mayor. He was the 50th mayor of Rochester from 22 to 26. That's him right there, but you can't see his glasses too well, but that's definitely him. Right. This is a picture of their store, one of the locations. So you see the skinny, deep store. You see the vertical stacking of the floors, and up here in that peak up top, that little peak over there, it says Payne Drug Company in there, and that's their location on East Main Street. Just to give you an idea of the density of how these stores were laid out, the store with the little red dot on it is the one we were just looking at, and then this is an exploded view. It's a little newer view, but it's an exploded view of the things that were on different floors within the building. 5 great floors with the pharmacy, prescription department being at the heart of it down below. But the many other things that they sold, rubber goods, cosmetics, candies, cigars, all those things would have been scattered throughout these stores. The companies in that time, this is when people cared about a newspaper, and they advertised very heavily. These are like quarter-page ads when the newspaper still had, a big sheet of paper on each half instead of the flyer that you get now. So they spent a lot of money on ads. Go ahead. And so then they prospered and opened another store. This is 20 and 22 West Main Street. You can see Payne Drug up there, and I zoomed in a little more here just so you'd know for sure. And the next slide, I think it's the next one. There you go. Yep. So does anybody recognize this corner? Look, the newcomer got it correct right off the bat. He just sat down. This is where the Liberty Pole is, right here at this point. There's a Sibley building. So this is Main Street, and this is right. So this is East Avenue coming in, and that at the top it says Payne Drugs. You can't, it's too small to read, but that was Payne Drugs. And keep that image in mind as we continue. Now an interior view of what some of these long, skinny stores were like. I mean, it's obviously long and skinny. You could pretty much do one counter and almost go to another counter. They did a lot with advertising and tokens and giveaways and things like that too, which is what we see in the upper left corner. They were also, because they were kind of homeopathic, there were things sold that you could take home and try on your own if you felt like it. So this is a ferritic battery from the Payne Drug Company, and basically you hooked yourself up to it and shocked yourself, and if you got right, charge the paddles is kind of like that. But I'm not sure I'd be plugging myself in and pushing a button, but they did sell these. Yeah, I don't know. They did well in their businesses. When Cyrus died, his estate would have been currently worth $9.2 million, and Lemuel's estate would have been worth $10 million. So they did okay. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what it is now. Oh no, I got it. It's marked for today. All right, go ahead. Now we're on the Guilford Drug Company. If you look carefully, and I circled it so you don't have to look that hard. Right away, again, we see Haas Swedish Remedies. So that's the same G.H. Haas that we saw when we started, the very first druggist that we looked at. And this is consistent. You see these remedies, and the homeopathic thing shows up again. He was president of the North American Retail Druggists Association, and he had a little dog as his pet. You can see the dog there. Go ahead. No, it's not little. One of his stores, we're back to the same corner, right? There's Main, there's East Avenue, Sibley building. It's a little different angle, but it's Guilford's store. You can't, it's in the white across the banner there above Coca-Cola, but this was one of his stores. He ended up with 3 stores in Andrews Street and State Street, downtown, and on this corner. The more you dig, the more you find out. And I've done this talk 4 or 5 times before I found out what's on the bottom of the page here. So this was his Guilford's. This is Andrews and State, and there's the railroad that's still there, I think. Oh, what? I don't know. I'm sure he did okay. Everybody did okay. But I was reading a book just way after this thing was done, and I'm reading along, and it was about Rattlesnake Pete. And he hung out, Rattlesnake Pete, here he is. He used to use rattlesnakes to cure all kinds of problems, right? Back pain, neck pain, whatever it might be. This was his emporium, and he was pals with DeVisser and Guilford, and they used to hang out and tell stories and talk politics and do all kinds of things in the drugstore. I was just shocked to find that. I'm just reading the book, and it says, yeah, he used to hang around with, okay. All right, go ahead. So here we see, this is the downtown store right on Main Street. On the map up there, and a little bit of an angle view of it over here. And I'm going to show you some inside pictures, because these places were not shabby. They weren't casually or poorly put together. So up here, this is the same store we just saw on the front on Main Street, right? This is the cashier's desk and the perfume section. I mean, everything is glass, all cases, nice, well protected. Down here is the cigar section. Go ahead. Up Up here on the left is the candy and stationery section, and down here are the toilet goods and rubber goods sections. So it was nice. The whole thing is really nice. Very highly quality done. If the glass is as clean as it looks like in here, I'm amazed, but it is very nice looking. But he had a different claim to fame other than drugstores. Go ahead. Oh, sorry, I didn't get there yet. It talks about when he opened his third store. Again, the ads show Haas Remedies. Now we start to see where chocolates come from. On the fourth floor, one of his buildings, it was used entirely for making candy. I don't know how he got into it, but he decided to make candy. They averaged 3,000 pounds a week. And again, I don't know where that ranks in the, is that Stevers? Is that Fannie Farmer? I don't know. It seems like a lot of chocolate. 3,000 pounds a week. We eat 2 Cadbury eggs. I'm doing good. They were sold under the name of Guilford's Worth More Chocolates. Eventually, different people became the manager of the place, and they got connected with National Drug Company, bought all 3 of the Guilford stores, and here this confirms the addresses that we talked about where they were located. That's him in the left, up left, that's his house on Barrington Street, which is still there. He was in partnership, the 2 guys with him, he's in the middle, were Ernest Berger and Cuban cigar man Emilio Pons. And they partnered together to form the Tampa Cuba Cigar Company in Florida, which we see here. Here's another one of those characters out of that same book that's over in the library. And again, he's not in there as a druggist, he's in there as a candy maker. But he's using his mortar and pestle to mix up sugar and water and whatever he decides needs to go into it. He was very big on assuring people that they would get the best chocolates. His own personal handwritten guarantee is at the top. And, he didn't miss a marketing thing. So he's telling you down here that if you buy his chocolates, they're worth 60 cents. You only have to pay 25 cents. So you save 35 cents and had good chocolate. I love these. These drawings are great. If you don't do anything someday, just take that book and flip through. There's like 140 people in there. Okay. Dake Drug Company. This first circle there kind of ties into what I said. There was no formal training required. So William Ward Dake, he's in the 1875 Rochester City Directory, and his occupation is a grocer. A year later, he's a druggist. I don't know what he did, going from age 18 to 19, but now he's a druggist. They were also big on homeopathic medicines. Eventually, they had 3 drugstores. The biggest one was also on Main Street, which is no surprise. At one point, he was hit by lightning while lowering the flag in his front yard. It knocked him unconscious, but he survived. This is Dake Drug Company next to the Whitcomb House Hotel, which is one of the biggest downtown, fanciest hotels at the time. You can see it on the corner, Main Street, the tall part. This is, they had Dake's written on the side of the building over here. And this is, I forget, one of the parades. There were periodically a lot of parades after war times and things like that, bond drives. And that's what that picture is. A little closer shot of the building, and again, now here's where these different things start to mix, right? So here's candies. It's Euler's candies. It's a different type of candy, but the candy is fully into the drugstores at this point. The next slide is a name probably, if you're around here a lot, you'd remember, but these are clippings from the diaries and journals of Mary Bragdon, who was the sister of Claude Bragdon, the famous architect, and then they were also big-time abolitionists. And it kind of speaks to how important the drugstores were as a social center, in addition to what they were, for medicines and things like that. So since you can't read the writing, These are clippings from her journal. The first one says, "We went to Dake's for hot chocolate and cold cream afterward." I think a show. Second one says, "And we went to Dake's for ice cream soda." Third one, "From Dake's I saw lots of chorus girls come down. Some came up for soda water." I think it was a show or something in one of the downtown theaters. Fourth one, "And I had a grape phosphate at Dake's." And then the last one, "I went to church, went downtown to buy film, but Dake's was closed." The mention of film in there, just file that away in your head, because you'll see a little bit more about how film becomes a factor. He ordered a custom soda fountain, so soda fountains are huge again. It was custom made and it was too big to ship in a boxcar on a train, so they had to have a flatbed rail car to put it in and ship it here. He opened a store. The Dakes opened a second store right here on Main Street. And remember the earlier picture that had a wagon in front of Payne's drugstore, and I kind of zoomed in on it? That's where that second Payne store was. And then when we come to it, over here was the Isaac and Jacob Post drugstore on this corner. So you can tell how close they were. And the Powers Hotel building also had druggists in it. So they were all over the place. They did a huge amount with giveaways. Dolls, you could guess and win a doll. 5,000 bottles of perfume given away. 2 persons to the World's Fair. Things for kids to play with. Go ahead. And they had all kinds of weird things too, you know, danderine and blood wine. I have no idea what went into blood wine. Don't necessarily want to know. But they sold all these type of things too. Atomizers, California wine, patent medicine, perfume drugs, corn cures, razor strops. Trusses are huge too. Trusses were all over the place. Everybody sold trusses. Infant food, candy, and toothbrushes. What's kind of interesting, you'll see it later with Mr. Hyde's, they listed every price of everything they sold. So when they had these huge ads, they would put an item on and everybody's price. Okay, so Dake did a lot also with, here's a couple of the oddball items, Crown perfumeries, and then again with tokens, things you could get and redeem for sodas and things like that. Eventually, you know, all of the Dakes, and there were a lot of them, passed away. The only reason this article is up here on the right, this is from 1908, and I was just kind of shocked that 3 of the Dake family members, they had a reunion, and one couple celebrated 60 years marriage, the other one 57 years marriage, and the other one 65 years marriage before their death. And I was like, that is unusually long for anybody, even nowadays, to get to that point. This family was also a lot of farmers in Irondequoit, and Charles' son, Reuben A. Dake, was born there. Dake Road is named for the members of the family, and Dake Junior High School is named after him, built in 1931 at a cost of $200,000. Okay. Curran and Goler. Curran and Goler had the drugstore in the Powers Hotel building. Both very significant. In this picture you get to see a dose spoon. Up until now we've just seen the cups, but they used to have a glass spoon about that big with a little loopy handle on it. The trouble was that all 3 doses, tablespoon, teaspoon, dessert spoon, tried to go into a spoon that was a 1/2 inch thick. So if you tried to pour it in there and then take this shallow spoon over to somebody, you know, like that, you would never necessarily get it there. So the measurements were wrong a lot, and that's why they went to the cups, because you had a lot more room to carry it in. A picture that everybody knows, the Powers building, I think. Their drugstore is, the location's down there in the lower left. These guys were most famous for their Civil War antics and heroism. Both of them were very, very involved. Mr. Goler, George Goler, Major George Washington Goler to be more specific, he's buried at Mount Hope, and he's right up near Nathaniel Rochester and a lot of other early people like that. And there's some stories around, if you look him up, about how heroic he was in leading charges and things like that. He served in almost every campaign for the Union, and it lists them all in that middle section there. He was captured a couple times and spent time in Confederate prisons, and then was exchanged for other prisoners to get out. What was somewhat unusual too, he had a nephew who's over here to the right, also named George Washington Goler. Why he mattered was because he was a director of health for the city, and at the time milk was not safely gathered, processed, or distributed. So he was a big advocate for improving the safety of milk supplies. At the time, the mayor called him one of the biggest cranks and best health officers in the United States. But it was there were huge reductions. Some of it was how milk was gathered in sanitary pails. Some was how it was shipped on milk trains, they were called. And then some of it has to do with the processing and things like that. But it was a big deal. Mr. Curran was the first Medal of Honor winner from Rochester for his work in the Civil War. He served in many, many battles as well, present at the surrender of Lee to Grant at Appomattox. And another, I'm dropping names all over, right? He studied with Oliver Wendell Holmes in Seneca Falls when he became a doctor. And he also served as a mayor in 1892 in Rochester. At the time, he was the first and only Medal of Honor recipient, but now there have been at least two. Gary Bykirk and David Bellavia have gotten Medals of Honor since then. So, and we have another caricature here. I don't want to overstate how much I enjoy these things, but they're great. It talks about what he did. Somehow he was involved in the iron molding business, or he spoke out about a lot of things. The next slide talks, this is, did it go? This is an artist rendering of how and why he got the Medal of Honor. This is the Congressional Record War Department describing it. But the narrative for it says that, you know, basically without regard for whether you were a Union or Confederate, he took cover behind these haystacks, and then different people would haul, it didn't matter which you were, they would bring him behind these haystacks, and he took care of people as long as he could from either side to try and save their lives. He was very good about that. And he says he stayed out as long as he could. I worked with all the zeal and strength I could muster, caring for wounded and dying until far into the night. And for that, he got the Medal of Honor. The picture is really cool, I think, because no photographs, but it's a nice artwork piece. This is a calendar I have from them in 1884. I put it in just for fun because nowadays there's a lot of imagery here that probably wouldn't fly. And this is the back of the calendar, and it's about 5 inches wide, maybe 10, 11 inches tall. But basically, they're showing a boat kind of, rowing through Africa, and African people are all over the place on these boats, and that's compliments of your druggists. So I don't know if they were gathering things from out in the African area or not, and getting it to the druggist. It's in color. It's really nice, but I don't know what it would do right now. Okay. B.M. Hyde, Byron Hyde. Byron Hyde down on Main Street, and at the time they were kind of mixing alcohol with drugs, which we saw before. What's unusual is he was right next to the Temperance Hotel, which was doing everything it could to keep people from drinking. He became very, very prosperous. This is a picture of two styles of the dose cups. This one's about 2 inches high, and the one on the right's a little taller. But they went from embossed lettering to etched because it was cheaper to make them. And I'm lucky enough to have one of each. The ads I mentioned, same thing. He advertised like crazy. And again, you can see pretty much here's drugs, medicines, toilet articles, everything listed, everything priced. So when you went in, you knew what you were getting, and you didn't have to ask too many questions. I'm sorry, I'm bad with the mic. Okay. Another connection, which is especially for us in Irondequoit, and more names that you would know, he became a partner in the Irondequoit Fruit Juice Company, which was formed as a subsidiary to the Irondequoit Wine Company. The directors included Asa McBride, Byron Hyde, the druggist, and William Titus. So if you live in Irondequoit or anywhere in the north, it's the same Titus that was Titus Avenue. And at the time, these are winery or grape growing areas along Newport Road, and the slope. There's several little ins and outs along there when you go down Newport Road that they grew grapes on. Now it's houses, condominiums in a couple spots. But they were big in getting, one of the key things for them was to build a means to get the heavy hauling of all the grapes and stuff from way down below up the Newport Hill, which is, like that, to get up. That was one of the most laborious things they had to do. And you can see a Indian Head, Irondequoit Fruit Juice Company, Rochester, New York glass over there. He too has a cartoon. He hightailed it out of town when he got a better offer. He became part of the first board of directors of the United Drug Company, this just kind of lists that. And they were part of the famous Rexall brand. He encouraged his employees to be somewhat self-sufficient and take actions on their own, but he was nice to them. He offered them life insurance plans and a few other things that were not common at that time. 50 some yearly pay increases and things like that. So he also, aside from the United Drug Company, got into the national. We talked about Guilford and making cigars. He got into the National Cigar Stand Company. So what happened was and you'll see a picture later, there used to be a lot of drugstores, and then somewhere else there'd be a cigar store dedicated just to cigars. The drugstore started to take the cigars in, which we saw in the inside picture of Guilford's store, but this caused a lot of issues because the drug people, or the cigar people, lost a lot of income to the drugstore people who are now selling cigars. So they didn't make too many friends with that. This is just a picture of a tip tray showing all the brands that they sold around here of different cigars. He promoted heavily with all kinds of unusual things: satin skin cream, castor ovals, I don't know exactly what they were, get strong pills, Orine, a scientific cure for drunkenness. I kind of like that one. I don't know what you did, but I guess it made you better. All right, now we're going out of Rochester for a minute because in the original stories of this, they asked me to go a little outside, do Western New York, so I put some of that in. This is Gorton and Turnbull in Corning, New York. This picture kind of reaffirms that proximity thing with druggists, right? Boom, 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 boom. Very close together. We've been to Corning a bunch. It's probably not even a 80-foot walk between some of those stores. They're really packed in. That building, which was his, is still down there today. He was famous. His father used to cart him around before the Civil War to help raise money. During this period of the war, before he was even 10 years old, they called him the drummer boy of the Southern Tier because he had to keep the drum rolling while they were trying to raise money, recruit people into the troops for the Civil War. 10-year-old kid. His family did exceptionally well in other things, and you'll see more of that in just a minute. But he was involved in, he was the first mayor of Corning, president of the Corning Iron Works, Corning Brake Shoe Company, and Gorton Chocolate. Back to candy again, right? He is probably most appreciated at this point because he was organized the scouts in Steuben County and donated land for Winnetka Lake Gorton Boy Scout Camp. You can see the road and the tents along down there. It was 1924 that it started. I mentioned film, and we'll see even more about it in a minute, but his partner from that Dose Cup was Gorton and Turnbull. Most of them had many partnerships, so you can see Turnbull and Calkins here, but they were big sellers of Kodak cameras. And here's a picture of a Turbo store with the Rexall name on it down in Corning, New York. I only put this in for a couple of laughs. He was one of the first people to have a car in Corning, and the irony, well, it says he'd outgrown his motorcycle and he bought an automobile powered by steam. Sounds good, right? Except he made the steam with kerosene or gasoline, so it didn't really make a difference. He may as well have just driven a car driven from one of those two. Social hubs that drugstores were. This Rose Coughlin woman was a big-time kind of vaudeville entertainer, and they sold tickets from his drugstore, and almost every drugstore became like a hub for people with social events and things like that. You could buy tickets to all kinds of. They were heavily involved in railroads. Some of the lines you can see on the left maps, known as the Charleston, Cincinnati, and Chicago Triple C Railroad. Back to candy. This is a picture of Market Street in Corning, and all these buildings became part of the Gorton Chocolate Company, which marketed under the name of the Munger Candy Company over here. This is a letterhead from Munger Candy Company, sold to J.H. Smelly in Hammondsport, New York. So don't forget that name either. I don't believe what I have here to be factual, but at one point they said he had 25 men working to make 20,000 pounds of candy a day. So I was trying to picture water, sugar, whatever, to make 20,000 pounds a day back then in Corning. I mean, I don't know. I don't buy it, but I found it in 3 different publications, so that's why it's got an asterisk. Okay. They had several patents. I'm going to go quicker here, Maria, too. So they had several patents for brake shoe, railroad things, switching devices, brake pads, brake shoes. This is a picture of their foundries down in Corning. A lot going on in there. It became ABEX, which, I don't know if you know railroads, ABEX is a big deal in the railroad brake industry. Go ahead. So, we just saw the name Smelly buying Munger candy from the guy in Corning. J.H. Smelly was a druggist in Hammondsport. We found this by accident, even though we already had a dose cup from Mr. Smelly. We went to Hammondsport just for fun, and we were walking to Town Square, is kind of like where we're standing, and we look up and here's the store, the Smelly's Rexall store. That sign was still there. This is about 10 years ago, maybe. It's since been taken down, and when we went back, I was like, where'd that thing go? But they took it down to the Glenn Curtis Museum, which is right down there, and it's in storage until they put it into an exhibit. So I just mentioned the giveaway in terms of why Smelly is a big deal, because if it's just a drugstore, it doesn't mean that much. Go ahead. He was from Canada, and you can see him in his store on the left. One of their big things was baby stuff. Our baby cough syrup. He was most famous for his role probably in helping Glenn Curtis get started with flight, with motorcycles, with bicycles. He enabled Curtis to start manufacturing his own bicycles and things like that under the Hercules name. He let him go sell his own stuff. Interestingly enough, when Glenn was in 8th grade, he moved up here with his mother and his deaf sister to Rochester to support the family. And he worked for Kodak, which I wouldn't have guessed. He used to make $4 a week, but he was originally paid by the piece, but he was so skilled with his hands and what he could make and things that they took him off piecework and put him on a weekly salary because it was costing him too much money the other way. Go ahead. Curtis was the star of Smelly's Pep Cycle Boys in 1896. It's a racing team. Bike racing was big. Now, there are no color pictures, but local lore here said Glenn Curtis showed up in really nice black shorts, a red short sleeve shirt, and a red knit cap. And the gossip around town was that, why were they dressed so nice? Well, because Smelly, who ran a bunch of businesses, was mocked for his name a lot. So he didn't want anybody looking cheap or poorly put together. So they spent extra money on uniforms so that they would look really sharp. Smelly did not like, Curtis did not invent the motorcycle. But with Smelly's pushing, he invented some faster, tougher motorcycles because the horseless carriage thing got really old with Glenn Curtis, and he was tired of pushing things up and down this hill. So Curtis invented what became and had the speed record for the fastest motorcycle on Earth at the time, 1907. Here's a picture of one of his factories, and then here's his whole team down here. He's sitting right behind the motorcycle, front wheel with a tie on, Glenn Curtis is. He was also one of the first to design and build a seaplane and to have ship deck launches and landings. And it must have been fun being the first guy who just said, fly off the end of the boat, you know. But it worked, and there's a lot of contention between Curtis's accomplishments and the Wright brothers, because they were all like laying all over each other in terms of time frame, but they all seem to have big contributions. And the museum down there is great if you've never been to the Curtis Museum. All right, back to Rochester. Apothecary Hall was founded and run by Isaac Post. They were Quakers that came from Scipio, New York, into Rochester. So Isaac and Amy Post, probably two of the most famous abolitionist suffragists in the whole area. Very active. Frederick Douglass, Susan B. Anthony, the women's Seneca Falls stuff, all those things are connected to these guys. So they were in Smith Arcade, which is the original old name, but it was on Main Street and the corner of Four Corners, State and Main. I have a picture here. So a little hard to see. This is the picture I found, and I saw down in the corner there, and blowing it up, all you can see is the word Post. But that's where Isaac Post Drugstore was. Again, a lot of vertical businesses in this building, tickets for the streetcar waiting room, and the railroads were sold out of this building. There's Amy, there's Isaac. These are in Mount Hope Cemetery, so if you're ever around, you can go there. It's pretty interesting to see. They had one of the largest stops before the trip to Canada, so people would come up and they'd stop in Rochester and then go over to Canada. Go ahead, I'm left this through here. The place where their home was is now where Hochstein School of Music is. There's a marker there for it, but Hochstein is, basically takes most of that corner. It was right where Central Pres Church is, too. It was kind of right there. Frederick Douglass wrote a lot to them. He's saying right now, I fully resolved to bring my family to Rochester in a short time. He's asking for rent not to exceed $100 a year. And he's talking about how he's sorry it took him so long to get back here. Picture of the house before it was torn down. I'm sure nobody really knew at the time or gave a thought to why it was torn down, because I'm sure it'd be at least like Susan B. Anthony's house. It would be at least as significant. The picture in the upper right is the parlor, and the picture on the bottom right is the basement where they had up to 15 escaped prisoners. Pretty good slip, right? That's about it. Escaped slaves in the basement before they would have opportunity to get them across into Canada. On the left is a picture where Frederick Douglass published the North Star, his newspaper. He did that with the help of one of Isaac Curtis's sons, too, which we'll hear about in just a second. I will shorten all this because I just need to. It talks about the numbers of people they sent, work with the North Star, the Women's Rights Convention for Susan B. There are other we'll see a different son in a minute, but son Joseph worked for Frederick Douglass to help getting the North Star published, some in Charlotte and then some in the city. The strange connection that kind of saw the posts go from Quakers to spiritualists was augmented by these lovely ladies, the Fox sisters, who probably everybody has heard the Fox sisters if you've been around a while. Leah, Kate, and Margaret. It was thought to be fake and later proven to be fake, but they, oh no, is this real? You know, they would all attest to the legitimacy of the whole thing. And the Posts bought into it and invited them into their Rochester home, and just being around the Post gave it a lot of credibility. So people said, oh, you know, probably does exist. Eventually, all the truth came out, and you know, fraud it is. Handwritten letter talking from Frederick Douglass to Amy. I finally decided to publish the North Star in Rochester, make the city my home. I'm buying type and all the little, and I can't read that part, of a printing establishment. I will be able to something as early as November. Best love to members of your family, Frederick Douglass. So aside from the books with the caricatures and stuff that are over here, the U of R has amazing collections of Isaac and Amy Post, Frederick Douglass stuff. They're in a special historical area, and I don't think you can take things out, but you can go in and read them and white glove them and stuff like that. But there's a lot of information. The son, one of the sons was Jacob Post, and his building was in the same location, Main and Exchange. There's the dose cup for him. Go ahead. This is one of his bottles. It's a green bottle. I would love to own it. I don't. 3 and 5 Exchange Street. I think the next picture or two is kind of interesting. You can't read it yet, but you will in a minute. So there's the Powers building right there. And then this is State and Main, and they were putting trolleys and new tracks in there. The next picture is really fun from my point of view. Go ahead. So here's where we see these things come together. Central Cigar Store, Post Company Medicines, Kodak cameras. So now we have all these things together. We don't have a soda fountain in there, but we got all these other elements. That's one of my favorite pictures. Go ahead. Their store, again, skinny. He moved around to 17 Main Street later. Up at the top is the name, but you know, you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stories in a very skinny building, a skinny one next to it. Go ahead. I will skip some of these for everybody's sake, not least of which is mine, because there's a lot more information here just about obituaries and things like that. Go ahead. Same thing, keep going. Keep going. So he was not shy to advertise either. All these ads over here, and I think what kind of, you know, we see candy again, right? Candy down here, but I think what amazes me most are the things that they would just sell you over the counter. So you could walk in and you could buy blue vitriol, arsenate of lead, formaldehyde, corrosive sublimate, lime sulfur solution, and I guess take it home and concoct it or do whatever you felt you needed to do, and then take it. It's a little bit disturbing because I don't even know what those are except formaldehyde. Go ahead. The significance of Jacob Kirby Post in anti-slavery is noted in this letter from William C. Fell. All these people are very significant. So he's writing, "Dear friend Jacob," and because Jacob's trying to check on everybody to see how they were doing wherever they were. Henry R., I think it's Rock, I don't really say it right. This picture and so he updates on that. He's in the upper right there. Charles Lennox Ramond is on the left there, the purple picture. Down below is William Cooper Nell. Up above is Harriet Jacobs, who has written some very interesting and well-regarded books. George Thompson is on the right here. And so this was an update from William Cooper Nell to Jacob, telling him about all the work all these people are doing in the anti-slavery movement. J.K. Post was a pallbearer at Frederick Douglass's funeral. Go ahead. Douglass sent a telegram to Post on the passing of his father, Isaac. There's some interesting stories he told about Frederick Douglass being in Dublin, Ireland, and playing a violin, and how the store owner was going to sell it cheap, but Frederick Douglass played it, and he played it well. And then they asked if it was for sale, and he said yes, but now the price was, much higher than it was to begin with. He sold lots of things, olive oil. This is a picture of Douglass's funeral inside the church. Obviously a big deal. Probably Rochester's most famous. Maybe he and Susan B. Anthony are the most famous. Brother was Joseph Post, who worked with Frederick Douglass as a druggist for himself, but as a publisher for the North Star. That's his dose cup. He had a store on West Main. Now you can see this is all kind of overlaps, right? Where the other stores was all along here on West Main, and then Joseph Post had a store there. But he also had a store, which is probably more significant, on Broadway, which is now Lake Avenue, up in Charlotte. He was a big advocate. Go ahead. He was the leading advocate to have Charlotte annexed into the city, so that the city would always have a right-of-way up to the lake. Now it's a skinny little right-of-way, right? It's just basically up Lake Avenue. But he was a big advocate for that, and it took him a long time to get that through, but they eventually did. A picture of one of his advertising cards, and more tidbits that help confirm. So he helped print the North Star. Go ahead. They had one other brother. Not going to spend much time, but this is Willett Post. He was a manufacturer of corks, and he had it made because his brothers and his father were all selling to druggists who had bottles that you needed to put a cork in. So he would follow around and manufacture and sell corks to all these people. So he did well. That's the only one for him. Go ahead. They also had a sister, Mary Hollowell, again very active in the Susan B. Anthony Underground Railroad, all those type of things. Do we have a couple minutes yet, Emily? All right. Well, I won't take that long because I don't want to kill you guys out here. I want everybody to be alert. We're going to spend just a couple minutes on patent medicine because it was big in this area. Leroy, Binghamton, two of the biggest. And some of the time I'm really interested in it just because of the artwork. Very interesting. These four, FEC was a kidney medicine. Moon's Emerald Oil comes in a bottle that you store upside down. So the writing on the bottle is upside down on an angle because you were supposed to store it on its neck and cap for whatever reason, to keep it mixed. That'd be Moon's. Taft's Asmoline, which was nothing really, but it sold. And then Duffy's Malt Whiskey, which is one of the biggest ones of all. Here's from Gargling Merchants, was big in Lockport. Warner's Cures out of Rochester. Kemp's out of Leroy. And Bacon's from Leroy. I don't know what the driving factor was for that many people to be out of Leroy, but a lot of them were. Dr. Pierce out of Buffalo was huge in this stuff too. Dr. Pierce's World's Dispensary, several pictures of the things that he advertised. The only guaranteed cure for female weakness and kindred ailments. Keep that in mind if you're ever in the need for something really weird. Go ahead. The Duffys I mentioned before, Duffy got around the prohibition, the people that wanted to outlaw alcohol. He got around it by making pure malt whiskey, which it says up there, and then he put a medicine stamped into the bottom of the spoon. So you could take it and say, oh no, I was just taking my medicine, even though it was pure malt whiskey. But he had a huge operation. It was a distilling operation. makes the weak strong. And he gets, I love this part too, he gets clergymen to endorse it. He's got their little statements in there, why we think it's such a great product. What's that? Yeah, maybe. These guys, this is probably one of the biggest ones, again, is out of Binghamton, Dr. Kilmer's. Swamp root is all over the place, herbal remedies, ocean weed, again, no idea what any of this stuff is. Indian cough cure, yeah, prompt perilla liver pills. Go ahead. And then, kind of my favorite, Lydia Pinkham. If you're trying to collect bottles, just close your eyes and reach your hand out and you can grab a Lydia Pinkham's bottle because they're, you could call it new and try and sell it. But she was probably the most prolific, certainly female, for this stuff, vegetable compound. And this is my favorite ad of all right here. This famous tonic helps to give you pep and energy because men love peppy girls. So keep that in mind if you're looking for a cure-all for whatever. And I believe that that's the last slide. Is there one more? Is that it? That's it? Okay. That's enough of that then. I hope you've enjoyed this. If you have questions, fire away. I'll either make up an answer or I'll do the best I can to tell you the truth. Yes?
Sorry if I could have you repeat the question because we have an audience at home as well.
How did the transition to the Woolworth and more sort of five and dime stores, is that kind of sort of small trinkets and that they decide to break off from druggists to make it a more specialized merchandise?
I actually have no idea. I think a lot of the stuff that where we see change is driven by automobiles. Because you see when the Walgreens came in the 30s, now more people could afford a car. It didn't matter where you were, you could drive 2, 5, 10, 20 miles. And then there was land, too, a lot of land. You could just put a, every store you go in now is one story and spread out all over. You don't go up and down. But I'm gonna guess, but I don't have facts, that a lot of it's driven by that. That it for questions? Oh man, we're getting off easy.
Is that really it for everyone? Okay. I want to thank you all for coming. I want to thank Dick Campbell for this incredible presentation. Thank you so much. I have to say, I have worked in the local history and genealogy division for almost 12 years, and most of the photos he has found I have never seen before. You've done a tremendous amount of research. I'm so impressed, so thank you so much, and thank you all for coming.